Hello friends, welcome back to my studio and welcome to a new video. Today I'm doing something fun. I'm doing a sketchbook haul, and some of them are new sketchbooks that I've never tried before. So I'm going to do some of the swatches with some of my most used art supplies in each one of them. And also I'm going to show you how I break into the new sketchbooks. So I'm going to start with the new one that I've never tried before. This is Nova series by Stillman and Byrne. I've seen a lot of artists using it, and I've kind of like the gray tone of it. I've worked mainly with the neutral tones, with like beige tones paper before, so I'm excited to start doing something different and just trying out maybe new ideas and new supplies with this one. So the paper is quite thick. It's 150 GSM. It is shown that it's useful for mixed media paintings. It's quite smooth with a little bit of the tooth, and the paper is actually feeling quite thick as well. So one thing that I like to do is to actually cut off the part of the wrapper that has the information about the sketchbook, and to glue it on the back of the inside of the back cover. A lot of these sketchbooks only have the name printed on the inside, and they don't really have any information, so once you throw it out, it's really hard to remember what exactly was in there. So the first thing that I'm trying out is my Derwent drawing pencils, and I just wanted to see how well the color is going to be showing on the gray paper, because I plan on using some color pencils, and I'm actually really happy with this one. So the next one is the Prismacolor marker, and I just wanted to see if it's going to be showing through the back, and it wasn't, so that's really great for the mixed media use for this one. And the Ecoline markers pretty much never show through, but I still wanted to try them just to see how well they settle on the paper and how well the color is showing. And I just kept going for another one and another one, and the colors are very vibrant even though this is a gray paper. So the next one is a Copic marker. Even though I'm not using the Copics as much, I still just want to see how well the paper handles them. So these bled a little bit through the paper, but not as much actually. I'm surprised with the quality of the paper. The next ones are my Pentel brushes, and I don't have the packaging from these ones, so I don't know the exact names from them. All of the wrappers that are saved on the brushes are in Japanese or Chinese, I don't know. So I can't really give you more information about these, but these are pretty standard. A lot of artists are using them. My Tombow markers also pretty much never show through the paper, but I still want to see how they look on this gray color. And the new Sennelier ink brushes, I haven't tried them as much, but I wanted to see again how well they're going to be showing on the gray paper and how well the colors are going to be showing. And even with the light yellow one, I think it's a pretty good example of how this paper is handling colors. And it's one of my concerns was that everything is going to have kind of a grayish tone on the gray paper, but I'm happy with how the pigments actually are sitting on top of the paper, and that kind of preserves a lot of the color. So the wet media I'm swatching was just kind of little blobs of color, so I don't know how well it's going to handle large washes if I use anything in the future. But one of the things that I've noticed here is that maybe because of the sizing of the paper, that preserves a lot of the colors from bleeding through. It also makes a lot of the paint sit on top of the surface of the paper. Here I'm trying watercolors, and I've noticed both for gouache and for watercolor, it took a long time for that media to dry. It was sitting on top of the paper, and even though the colors are looking pretty good, I don't think I'm gonna be using a lot of watercolors and wet media in this sketchbook. I think I'm gonna do mainly markers and pencils, just because I like to use sketchbooks kind of in a fast fashion and on the go. Once I'm done, I want to close it up and go. I don't like to leave them open, so I don't think this is going to be the immediate for the sketchbook. And also, it did buckle just a tiny bit. The next one in this haul is the Moleskine Art Series sketchbook. This is not their watercolor one, but it still has pretty thick paper, and I've tried this one in a smaller format, but I'm actually quite excited to try it more of the larger sketchbooks with this haul, just to try new compositions and to have more room to move around. And Moleskine is one of my favorite ones for the way that it handles mixed media applications, and also I quite enjoy its ivory color of the paper. I think it's the right amount of warmth to add to my sketches. White colors are still not showing as much if you use white pens or white pencils for highlights, so that's not going to be showing. This paper is quite pale, but I do like the texture of it. It is smooth, but it's not like a Bristol paper smooth. So if you want to do color pencils, you are able to layer them to an extent, and it's not going to be gliding as much on top of the paper. I've honestly never used all of the inserts that Moleskine includes with their sketchbooks, was just like random graphs and information and like rulers and angles to use. So I don't really care about cutting out that insert as well, and I just tape it to the back of the sketchbook to have the information. Also, sometimes when I post it on Instagram, I get questions what type of paper that is and how thick it is, should somebody try it or not for whatever media they're using. And I honestly can't even remember, so I always have to look it up. So this way it's easier to then give them the information that they're asking for. So I'm trying only my Derwent color pencils for these swatches in these sketchbooks. I'm not taking out my Prismacolor color pencils. These are pretty similar. They are not as waxy, but I enjoy the limited palettes that I have, and that kind of helps me to explore more of the limited palette sketches rather than jumping into all of the full color ones with my Prismacolor set. So I'm just doing these, but they are pretty similar to the rest of the pencils, so you can just kind of use this as a guide for yourself as well. So the Ecoline markers look pretty good on this paper. They're not showing through, and they are settling quite nicely in the paper where you don't see the streaks. The color blends really nicely. My Prismacolor marker, it's if you ever try this one, it is similar to Copics, and it does bleed through this paper too. I don't use this one as much. I use it a little bit for sketching, and sometimes even though I know that certain markers are going to bleed through the paper, I still like to swatch them just to see how badly they usually show through the paper, because sometimes if it's not too bad, you can still kind of get away with sketching on top of it on the other side and still kind of maybe interpreting those shapes that transfer through the paper into some new shapes and trying out something abstract or using them as a background for the new sketches. You can still play with it in a way. My Tombow markers, as always, are not shown through, and they are pretty much the best ones for using in any type of sketchbooks. I've never tried the ink brushes by Sennelier in Moleskine sketchbooks, so I was quite pleased with how these settle on the paper as well. It gives a little bit of time to the watercolors to dry, but it doesn't really keep them sitting on top of the paper as long as the Stillman and Bird series. so they are drying fast, but they still, you know, dry softly. They don't really dry to the hard edge, so the color still blends a little bit and it blends smoothly. And my ink brushes by Pentel, use these quite a lot, so I always want to see how they look in every sketchbook. And I have a couple of these in different shades. Some are darker, some are lighter. Again, I don't have the rubbers anymore, so I don't really know the exact names for the colors. Some are water-based, and I think some are ink brushes, and some are pigment brushes, some of these, and at this point I don't even remember which one is which. And I also decided to swatch a Sharpie. Again, I don't use Sharpies as much, but I do use them for outlines sometimes. I like them for their dark color, but yeah, it's showing through. My gouaches they're working well. However, I am not using a lot of the wet media in my Moleskine sketchbooks. This again is mainly for markers and pencils. I do have their watercolor sketchbook, and I use that one mainly for all of the gouache paintings and all of the watercolor sketches. But I still like to put it on and just to see how that's gonna look, just in case if I decide to use something later along the way, then I can kind of refer to these swatches and see how that's gonna look on the paper. One thing I forgot to mention is to make sure that once you open the sketchbook from the back, you turn a page so that you are swatching on the actual page of the sketchbook. Some of them have sort of one of the liners inside of the sketchbook, a little bit one of the harder ones, a thicker paper, and that one's going to give you different results. So make sure you're swatching on the actual paper of the sketchbook. And here with watercolors, I'm also trying both opaque and transparent colors just to see how they look. And I'm trying mixing the colors a little bit on the paper, and again it buckles a little bit, doesn't really handle watercolor well. It becomes kind of a little grainy, has like the paper graininess to it that I don't really like how that looks with the watercolors. So the next one is actually a pretty exciting one. This is Zeta series by Stillman and Byrne, and this sketchbook is my first sketchbook that I'm actually gonna be using just for swatching. So I want to have like a designated area, like a catalog for all of my art supplies, all of my markers, all of my pencils, and I decided to get a separate sketchbook for that. And this one, Zeta series, is great because it has thicker paper. It handles the paper quite well. Handles the wet media quite well on this paper. And again, I'm just saving up all of the information as I do with all the other sketchbooks, just so I have it for the future reference. And in this video, I'm not gonna have time to swatch all of my art supplies. I think it's gonna take a while. At the end of the video, I'm actually going to show just a little bit of the different supplies that I did have time for sketching there. But I plan to kind of over time put all of my gouaches in there, maybe like just most used watercolor sets, more of my markers, just to have them for reference. Whenever I'm sitting down to sketch something, I can use this to create my color palettes. And I'm also liking how this resembles a little bit of the watercolor paper and how it handles the wet media, because this is probably what I'm going to be using most for my markers and the ink brushes and other supplies like this. It's kind of getting dark. I was losing daylight a little bit, so the color's probably not showing as well. But I'll show this in a separate video once I get the whole sketchbook filled up. But another reason I wanted to do that is to take the sketchbook with me to the store if I'm buying new supplies. So here is the one I'm most excited for. This one is by Talons, and this sketchbook is actually quite cheap. At my local art supply store, this was on sale for $10, 10 something, and I wanted to use this one as my daily sketchbook so that it's not too expensive. I don't feel too precious about it, but it still has pretty nice paper, and again, it has that nice ivory tone that I like. The Moleskine sketchbook is a little more expensive, so I always feel like a little more intimidated by it and a little more pressure to perform well in that sketchbook. But this one I wanted to have just like my daily messy sketchbook, ugly sketchbook, if you want to call it that way. But I've seen a lot of artists using quite a large variety of art supplies in it, and I thought that was working out well for them. So we'll see how this swatch goes. But also with the example of this sketchbook, I want to show you how I fully break into the sketchbook, not just doing the swatches on the back, but also how I start the sketchbook and what I kind of do for the first pages of it, so that I kind of eliminate a little bit of that what is it called, like the fear of the blank page, or the fear of the first page. Even though you know, over the years it's not as bad, and it's getting quite better, because I'm just excited to start, and I always have ideas for something new to do in a sketchbook. But I still feel like the first page sets the mood for the sketchbook, and this is the first thing you see when you open it. So you kind of want your future self to be inspired by the first pages. But I like to actually get a little messy with the first pages, so that the future me kind of has an easier job to do, so she's not living up to the high expectations. And I do you know, different things for different sketchbook depending on what my intention for that is. This one is going to be just a daily use, so you will see what I do for majority of my sketchbooks, because I don't really have a lot of the watercolor sketchbooks or wet media sketchbooks where I do paintings. So you know, most of them are mainly just for sketches. I talked pretty much through all of my swatching here, but you saw that you know, the Prismacolor and a Copic was still showing through. The watercolors and the watercolor brushes, the ink brushes by Sennelier, were doing quite well, and the watercolor brushes by the Ecoline were also doing quite well. The watercolors here are also not looking great. I tried mixing here and kind of working on the paper a little bit, just to see if the paper is going to be crumpling, and you know, with the little threads coming off and buckling. But you know, it is a daily use for the sketchbook, so I'm not too obsessed over it. So here is what I like to do first. On the first page, it's not even the page, it's actually right on the cover. So because usually the cover has a little bit of thicker paper, so you can do more with it, and I've decided to do a little mixed media messy painting. I had really no specific vision for this painting. I was just kind of going with the flow. It was from one of the pictures I took in the summer on one of our vacations. We went to the Delaware River, and I collected a lot of the wildflowers there, and I took a lot of pictures for reference for later to paint them on the cold winter days like today, when I don't have as many flowers to paint from. And I've also just wanted to get back into the painting mood. I haven't painted large in a while. I've only done smaller sketches lately, So I was excited to use the whole spread and to try going big, working with larger shapes and larger brushes. And I was a little intimidated at first, but then I kept reminding myself, this has to be loose, like this has to be just for fun, like nobody's gonna look at it if you don't want them to look at it, you know. If it turns out well, you don't have to I mean, it turns out bad, you don't have to post it. But I just pushed through. I pushed through all of my preservations and all of my fears, and just um, went into my Zen mood and continued to paint and just have fun with little details and with all of the colors. So enjoy watching a little bit of this painting, and I am going to come back in a little bit once I turn the page and kind of continue my process of breaking into the new sketchbook. So after I'm done with the cover, I like to continue with the momentum of just setting up the sketchbook for the use and not really using it as a sketchbook yet. So I just still like to do some fun and silly stuff. I like to put a quote that's been inspiring me lately, and this one is by Salvador Dali, and it says, "Have no fear or perfection, you will never reach it." And I think this is the great thing to look at once you open it, to kind of lower your expectations a little bit. And the next thing I do is I do a list of ideas for prompts for whenever I don't know what to sketch, but I feel inspired to sketch, so I can look back at it and get some ideas for it. And I also list a couple of the fun mediums that and art supplies that I can try in here, just to also again keep myself a little loose and try out new things. I'm actually going to post this on my Patreon page, and I'm gonna leave the link below so you can steal the prompt list and try it out for yourself. You can just print it out and put it inside of your sketchbook, or you can add some more to it from your own things and enjoy it on your own. And if I'm able to do something with the cover of the sketchbook, I like to do that too if it's not too glossy. And these Stillman and Burn series unfortunately have the velvety feel to it that just leaves a lot of the fingerprints, especially if you use a hand cream or hand lotion. It just becomes covered with all of these smudges. So I just decided to do something on the top, kind of as a distraction. So I didn't have time to do swatches for all of my art supplies, but I'm pretty happy with how this is looking. It's all in one place. And my biggest inspiration for this to actually take this to the art stores with me in the future to make sure I'm not buying something I already have in my collection. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed trying out new sketchbooks with me. Hopefully got you inspired to break into your own sketchbooks and feel less intimidated by the first page and to try something new with me. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and give it a like if you want to see more of this type of videos, and I'll be happy to make more for you. Also check out my Patreon to see more of my educational videos and tutorials there. And now I'll see you in the next video. Bye!